com.
When I was in Argentina, I went for a barbecue breakfast, and one of the guys I had breakfast with said to me, he said, there's two truths in Argentina. The sun rises and there's inflation. And when I spent my time there, it was interesting spending time with them because they learned to live with inflation. They understood it. Whereas I think in the UK and maybe here in the US, like within communities I know who are struggling, people who used to be able to afford a certain lifestyle and they can't now, they haven't fully accepted inflation, that it is permanent. And so I've kind of felt like even before selling the idea of Bitcoin, you have to convince people that every year you're going to get somewhere between 7 and 12% less purchasing power. And if your wages don't keep up with that, you have to find a defense. Do you say that's a fair starting point?
Yeah, if you live in the Western world, your hurdle rate's probably 7%. And so if you have any amount of wealth or capital, you want it to appreciate 7% in nominal terms in order to keep your relative wealth intact.
I think for some people, that's a hard reality to come to.
Well, the simple observation is that if you construct a market basket of products that are manufactured by robots, like say ketchup or chocolate bars or cereal that comes in boxes, you can manufacture that more efficiently today than 200 years ago. So some things are getting cheaper to manufacture. Electricity, petroleum, machines, they made it possible to stamp out, 18 million pencils quicker and cheaper. So if I construct a market basket of consumer goods that I can manufacture with machines or I can automate, that's not going to increase in cost 7% a year. That's going to increase in cost at the CPI, say 2% a year. Well, but on the other hand, if I create a market basket of products that cannot be manufactured by a robot or by a factory, that's going to increase in price. If not 7% a year, it might increase in price faster. So a practical example of that in the real world. The land that my house is on in Miami Beach cost $10,000 an acre 100 years ago. It costs $10 million an acre today, 1,000x. The thing you put on the land, if you manufacture it with concrete and glass, it did not go up in cost by 1,000x because we make glass and concrete much more efficiently today than we did 100 years ago. We just can't create waterfront property as efficiently. Now, people have noted with AIs, the next decade, we're going to automate out all sorts of white-collar jobs. So the cost to get a medical opinion or to get a will constructed or get some legal advice or to compose any sophisticated contract, that's falling exponentially. 10 years from now, we'll get this robot wave, and pretty soon you'll have the robots walking around, and the cost to move furniture around or the cost to paint your drywall or the cost to install a door is going to fall exponentially as well. Just like the cost to get from point A to point B will fall when the cars drive themselves. And it seems pretty clear the cars are going to drive themselves. So certain things are going to get exponentially cheaper. On the other hand, it costs you $50 million an acre for an acre of beachfront property in Palm Beach. Why? Well, because the robots can't make beachfront property in Palm Beach, right? The robots are, but the cost of the house on the property won't go up as fast, because if I can deploy 1,000 robots that cost me, $20,000 each, or I can rent the robot for $100 a month. Imagine a world where I basically rent robots at the cost of $100 a month and I have them build the house. The house may not be as expensive. The stuff, let's say it this way, if the robot can do it, it's not going to appreciate in price at 7% a year. It's going to appreciate at the CPI. Or, when I was a kid, rich people had record collections. And if you wanted to impress a girl, you invited her over to your house and you showed her your 200 records. And that was a rich dude, right? Today, anybody has 50 million songs in their hand, and it is not a sign of being rich. So if I want to construct a consumer price index, which is going up 2% a year, I just put an infinite record collection and infinite free streaming YouTube videos in the market basket, along with something drywall and a bunch of packaged starch that I manufactured at a big factory. All that stuff is actually getting cheaper. On the other hand, if I want to make you feel bad, I asked you about what it would cost you to buy 3 acres of beachfront property. And what you're going to find is that does not get cheaper. If affluent, intelligent, cultured people want it, it's going to get more expensive. It's what I call the Bernard Arnault test, right? If you want to preserve your wealth, you buy assets that someone richer than you, more cultured than you, more intelligent than you will want to buy from you in a decade.
Okay, so lesson 1, understand currency debasement. Lesson 2, understand assets and scarcity. And then you're ready.
It's a start. Are we talking about generalized advice?
Yeah, because look, I think
for the person struggling to navigate the winds of change in the modern world?
Yeah, because, when you try and approach somebody to explain Bitcoin, if you start with Bitcoin, I think it's a challenge. Sometimes they've had various bits of information they've seen or read, and they've got their lines ready. But I think if you start with inflation and debasement, and then understanding scarcity, then you can get to assets. And I generalize assets, and then why Bitcoin is the best.
Well, here's a simple thought experiment. If the year 1600 and you have the choice of owning a square mile in the middle of London, all the land, or owning any building constructed in the past decade in London, or owning the finest luxury goods manufactured in a shop in London in the year 1600, or owning anything consumable, or owning any vehicle operating on, on the land, in the sea, or in the sky in the year 1600, or owning all of the British, pounds, or a bunch of British pounds or currency or paper money in 1600, which of those things do you think would still be valuable in the year 2026?
The land.
The land.
Of course, the land.
The only thing, right? The richest family in the UK, the wealthy, they own the land. And why? Because the other stuff was obsolesced by technology. You can produce infinite copper tokens, and the ships rot, and the buildings decay. The land is good for quite a while, right? And so scarce desirable property means literally that. You want to own the land in the middle of London or the land in Manhattan. You don't want to own the land in Greenland or Antarctica. You don't want to own a bunch of Rocky Mountains. Why? It's property. It's just not desirable, and it's not necessarily scarce. There's a lot of it. So what is scarce desirable property? Well, obviously the most desirable land that any affluent, intelligent person would want. That changes, right? It used to be the middle of Rome or the middle of Carthage was, the royal palace of Cleopatra in Alexandria was pretty desirable until, the empire falls or the monarchy falls. So scarce desirable property can be redefined. But in the modern world, it would be the most desirable real estate capital, which is land, the most desirable cultural capital. That might mean the best sports team in the middle of the UK, right? Or it might be the nicest artwork, old masters paintings. It might be the most desirable metallic capital, not silver, not copper, not palladium, but gold. And it might be the most desirable digital capital, Bitcoin. Might be the most desirable intellectual property. I own the music rights to the Beatles, all the songs. I'm the only person that can license you to listen to Beatles songs. That's worth something, right? So those are all forms of scarce. Mineral rights. I own the mineral rights over the North Sea to all the oil in the North Sea. That's valuable, right? So all of those are examples of scarce desirable property. If you happen to own those rights or that property then you will outpace the rate of currency debasement. You want to be a property owner of some sort. What you don't want to do today is you don't really want to make money by being talented and working hard. Right? That sounds pretty provocative, but the problem is the robots are going to work hard. The cars are going to drive themselves, and once you train the AI on a Shakespearean sonnet, the AI will spit back Shakespearean sonnets just as good as Shakespeare in his prime. And so if you went to school and studied for 20 years to be able to compose, Shakespearean sonnets and great prose, that's getting to be less and less valuable. Just like being able to compose a 100-page last will and testament. That used to be valuable. Maybe that's still valuable for the next 5 years, but sometime this decade, you're going to say to the AI, hey, just compose an entire network of trust and wills for my entire family and then optimize it for which tax jurisdiction? You tell me. Okay, well, give me 16 of them. Now implement it. And it's all going to happen for $10. And it used to be that it'll cost you $10 million. And so hard work and talent are getting, human capital is getting demonetized, and that's really the lesson, which is if you think the glass beads are money and someone comes along with gold, then the glass beads get demonetized and you'll be poor if you hold on to them. It used to be that people that were big and strong that could, work in a farm field had value. And then the machines came along and it's like, no matter how strong and how hardworking you are, you're not as hardworking as a tractor. So that's not interesting to me anymore. And I think you see the progression of waves. So today, what you want to do is make sure that, you're not in the critical path of what the AIs can automate in the white collar world. And you don't want to be in the critical path of what the robots can automate in the blue collar world. You got about 10 years before the robots arrive. The AI, white collar bots are here right now, and they're going to run pretty hard.
Yeah, I'm asking you about people worried about what's happening right now. And you're saying, yeah, I mean, there are things you could do right now, but you need to be ready for the radical change that's coming over the next 10 years. There's an imperative to prepare for that world.
Well, like, for example, if you had a choice and you're going to spend 200,000 pounds to get a law degree or buy 200,000 pounds worth of desirable property, you might better off to invest it in buying the asset as opposed to getting the law degree. The value of being a lawyer is going to go from here and it's going to get whittled down, right, over time. When everyone gets 10,000 lawyers for $10 a month, right, there may be a living, but it's not by drafting the contracts. So really, most of these things, right, your company has 10,000 employees. What's your competitive edge? Well, we have 10,000 talented people to work hard. Not really, right? Now, what is valuable? Like who achieves the value? People with influence. Do you have power? Do you have money? Do you have fame? Do you have influence? Do you have distribution? Right? If you have an account with 5 million followers, right, then you can take an AI generated video and run it to 5 million people and monetize it. If you're the guy that creates the video by hand laboriously, but you have an account with 50 followers, you can't monetize it. So just like, Apple, if you got 1 billion people holding a device in their pocket, you can put any AI you want on that device and you can distribute it to 1 billion people. You have power through distribution. Amazon, they've got distribution, the last mile to hundreds of millions of households. When the robots come along and the cars drive themselves, can Amazon cash in on that?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, because the robot will drive to the household and they've already got the back end distribution channel and the brand, so they can monetize it. On the other hand, if you don't have that distribution channel to 250 million households, you're not going to be able to monetize the robot or the self-driving vehicle in the same way.
So you got 10 years to stake your claim in that world?
Just figure out. I mean, if you're starting your career, my advice to anybody would be figure out how to do something nobody's ever done before with tools that were never available to your parents. Right? It's like Justin Bieber gets discovered, on YouTube. Right? So are you trying to do what your parents did in the way they did it with the tools they used? Not a good idea, right? Are you doing something that you couldn't do 30 years ago, that there was no market for, that no one ever conceived of, with a tool that didn't exist? Yeah, there maybe it's a chance there, right?
But if you don't stake your claim, how do you picture the world for people who don't stake their claim 10 years time? They don't acquire assets. We radically changed AI and robotics. What's the world like for them?
I think there's going to be an explosion in prosperity because 1 billion robots will do all the work. 1 billion cars will drive themselves. We'll produce infinite entertainment, infinite drugs, infinite education, infinite stuff. If you can stamp it out with a factory or a robot, we'll produce it. And then I think you'll just see probably a socialist wave of entitlements where you'll start seeing universal health care. I mean, we already see it right now. Universal health care, universal basic income, universal housing, universal entitlements to transportation, public transportation, fill in the blank, right? What is it that, if you think about in Europe, right, there's this concept that everyone has a right to a list of 27 things and the state should provide them, right? Didn't used to be that way in the US, but in the US, it's becoming more and more like that. Like, I went to MIT, right? They never offered me a drug when I was in college, right? By the way, there was no Adderall. Adderall didn't exist. Xanax didn't exist. We didn't know about those things. If you needed a boost, you drank a Mountain Dew, right? And you stayed up all night. Then it became, every college kid needs to have healthcare. And then it became, you need free healthcare. Then it became, free healthcare means let's give them prescription drugs. And then it became, we can't wait till college. We need to give this to people in high school. And then pretty soon you had models wearing things like, I believe in teenage mental health. And then it became universal teenage mental health. And that became, I believe that every teenage person ought to have unlimited free state-sponsored drugs. And then it became, and we don't want the parents to stop them from taking them, right? And so I'm like, are you kidding me? Like at this point, we've normalized the idea that everyone should have unlimited free drugs in junior high. And if your parents wanted to stop you, that's a violation of your civil liberties. And that is so far removed from the world where I grew up.
Have we lost the plot?
I think there's this struggle between the Orwellian, future, and Brave New World, right? And Brave New World was, no, we just give everybody infinite entertainment and happiness.
Sex and drugs.
Yeah, right? Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley said, we'll just give infinite everything. So I don't know. What I think, though, is people worry that there won't be enough. That's not the problem. There'll be too much. Right? Too much music, too much entertainment, too much food, right? Too much alcohol, too much sugar, too much stimulation, right? You can sit and watch TikToks 80 hours a week. And then we can debate whether TikTok reels are better than Insta reels, or better than the reels that are coming up on X, or better than YouTube shorts, or better than Twitch, or better than listening to Infinite Spotify. Is that better than blah, blah, blah? It goes on and on and on and on and on and on. I think that different civilizations will be distinguished by just how they react to it. One reaction is try to create more freedom, and the other reaction is probably just socialize more things and create more entitlements.
You don't think the human experience aligns with abundance? We need scarcity. We need struggle. We need something like purpose.
I think it's healthier to have the natural order of things is scarcity and Darwinian competition. I think that when that breaks down, you get an artificiality. If you think about the difference between equilibrium in nature versus in a garden. In a garden, there's infinite curated everything, but you end up dumping fertilizers and dumping water and then pulling weeds. And you create this beautiful garden, but it's not stable. So as soon as the gardener disappears, then the entire thing, the system collapses under its own weight.
I mean, you would arguably have access to that abundance, that existence of abundance yourself. I have a certain amount compared relative to others. What does that access to an abundant life taught you?
Less is more. Humility. Just because you can do a thing, you shouldn't do the thing. I think you eventually find stoicism. I mean, I think, I've said this many times. The reason Bitcoin was successful was because of the humility of the ambition. And I think that the more grandiose the ambitions, the more likely it is that the society, the corporation, the ideology of the network collapses under its own weight. Like, imagine that. Remember the Napoleonic era. Napoleon first ended up inheriting, control of France. And then he decided he was the king of France or the emperor. And then he decided he needed to spread French values to the rest of Europe. And somehow it got to be spread French values to the frozen tundra, on the steppes of Russia in 1812. And somewhere along the line, he lost the plot, right? And it starts with these grandiose ambitions, and you see that over and over again in history, right? Some grandiose ambition, whether it's Julius Caesar or whether it's Napoleon or whether it's the spread of the British Empire. At some point, you've just reached too far.